Hello, hello. Okay, we're good, we're good. Hello there, everyone. This is Overlord 21. Merry Christmas to everyone. Um, I'm gonna go ahead and get started on the tier list. Let's do. I suppose we could do it like this way first. So let's talk about our spiky shell boy, known simply as Anguirus. Now, this fella, my opinion has increased of him a fair amount, actually. Me and this other dude have been doing a lot of Godzilla Save the Earth games. We've been just doing a lot of that. And turns out this dude is stronger than I gave him credit for in my older tier list. He has great combo potential. He has good damage. He has the best block in the game. Best low block in the game. Because you can't use an overhead on his low block because it just bounces off him. So the only way you can really deal with Anguirus is if you can either grab him or you have an unblockable attack, like or an attack that stuns him, like Space Godzilla's headbutt, for example. That stuns him. But that's basically like the only things you can really do to Anguirus' shield aside from grabbing. You can also use weapon attacks on him, like your beams and that sort of thing. But it does like 10 damage, so it's not really a good or even great option. It's just more of I want to do some damage than nothing. Because it's pretty much what every other physical attack will do to this dude. He's also pretty mobile, and he also has a great run because he's walks on all floors and it actually protects him from overhead attacks, which is really interesting. So like say your opponent's trying to hit you with an overhead slam, like a lot of the Godzillas or Gigan or quite a lot of monsters in this game have access to, he can just run and they'll just hit his shield and he won't really care. This also applies to his headbutt, so he's got some pretty good defensive options in this game, as well as good combos. His output's pretty good. His biggest problem is that he has one of the worst get-up attacks in the game because it leaves him vulnerable for a fair while. So as long as your opponent sees it coming and times it properly, they'll be able to punish you with an attack and then grab you immediately afterwards before you do anything. It's He definitely has one of the worst get-ups in the game, at least whenever he uses that attack. The other attack is actually pretty decent, but the one where he's belly up, that one's terrible. He's also vulnerable to edge attacks, which means he gets sent back further whenever he's hit, which is a big problem whenever you're fighting opponents to use a lot of edge attacks. But that's only when you're not using the shield. It's You should be using the shield as much as you can with Anguirus because it's really, really nice. Oh yeah, he also has decent jump moves. Like jump kick is one of his go-to moves. Jump fierce is also really nice for catching out opponents that for helping out with combos or hitting opponents that are on the ground in their get up state. It's good for punishing that as well as leading up to your next get up attack. If your opponent decides to just armor get up, you can just get up attack and they get sent flying. Not bad. Another problem Anguirus has is that his roar doesn't isn't really like it technically counts as a weapon, but it's like a concussion wave based kind of thing. Which there are monsters that are weak to it, but the range on it isn't particularly great. I mean the damage is okay, but it more or less exists there just for the sake of existing. It's not one of his go-to moves, but he's a pretty solid character in this game. I like him. He's way better than this Destroy All Monsters version, I can tell you that. That version was not very good. I actually did a video on him not too long ago, and I can tell you that experience was not great. Let's talk about Barragon. This little guy, he's pretty fun to use. I like this guy. Basically, what you want to do with this guy is just run around, use your fire breath as much as you can, unless you're fighting Rodan, but he's an exception, not the norm. Run around, use your fire breath to hold your opponents down, then you can either use down fierce to catch your opponent out for doing any moves. You can also use down punch if your opponent's low blocking. The biggest problem is like what you have to be careful with Baragon is he has several moves that are not great on block. So if your opponent has a fast punish option, like say Megalon Jump Punch or any of Godzilla's grabs or some other moves that are ridiculously fast, if you use those moves, you'll get punished pretty bad for it. But this dude has decent combo potential, and his grab, while a bit finicky at, grabbing the opponent, is incredibly hard to mash out of. And you can basically just use that to get basically free damage in. I would recommend using the fierce button option when you use the throw because that's your best damage. Although if your opponent resists blunt, then the kick version's also pretty good too. He also has great jumping moves, good aerials. His biggest problem is that he's kind of flimsy on the defense. Edged attacks chew him up pretty bad. Like Megalon Jump Punch does like 30 damage to him. Actually, it's 28. 28 instead of normal 25. So if you can catch him out using a bad move or you read his grab, you can just jump over him and hit him with the jump punch, and there goes a huge chunk of his hit points. Also, another thing about Baragon is that his get up attack is pretty short ranged, but at least he can use his fire breath while he's doing it, so it's like extra damage tacked on. It's not particularly great get up attack, it's just too short. Not though it's good if your opponent's too close or they use a laggy option that has them sitting there for like 10 minutes. It's fast, so he's got that going for him. That's the reason why I put him in B tier. He's far from bad, but he struggles in certain matchups, like King Ghidorah, Orga, and those kinds of monsters absolutely thrash this guy. Mostly because they have better neutral tools and they resist Baragon's strongest moves, which is a big problem. It's a big problem for Baragon. But I still call him far from bad. He's not really bad. Now let's talk about Destroya. Compared to his Destroy All Monsters version, this version is much worse. It's basically like being top dog to like second, maybe third dog, I guess. Um, the things that work against him in this game is that you can block his horn attacks. You still take good damage from the horns, but you can block them. And even if you use it on get up, your opponent can still act out of it. So they can, and well, get up attacks being unblockable means this dude can't just camp you whenever you're on the ground. They have to actually space themselves out to not get hit by the get up attacks. Also, his jump punch got nerfed. It's still high damage, but it doesn't hit grounded opponents, and it's slower. But his other aerials are still pretty solid. Like, I really like his jump kick against bigger opponents, or at least opponents that are relatively Godzilla sized. You can use the kick to punish them pretty good. It's a very nice move. Another thing, yeah, it's basically just get up is much better in this game than Destroy Monsters Melee, so he can't abuse the horn stuff on them. His beam also doesn't toe stub people anymore, so that's also a problem. And his beam is just generally not as good as it was in that game. Although I will say what's better in this game compared to Destroy All Monsters Melee is the orb. That thing is ridiculous. 2 energy for a 15 damage orb that drags in your opponents, and you can spam them. So, like, if your opponent isn't blocking, that's like easy 45 damage from 3 orbs. It's pretty good move. Pretty good stuff. Just be careful about using it close ranges, or if your opponent sees it coming, they'll just block it. That's kind of, and I wouldn't say that's a waste of energy, but that's not the full potential you can get out of it. He has good grabs. Like, I generally like his special throw more than his kick throw, but if you're gonna, but if a bear is behind you, use kick throw. because then you can lead yourself into another hit. It's like punch is good for damage. Your kick moves are good for damage, like back kick, even if it's a bit slow and not safe on block. Up kick is also nice for catching out low attacks. Let's see what else about Destroyer. Oh yeah, the horn's pretty nice. Also, this dude can basically jab loop into himself if you do something called Kara canceling, but I'm not going to go into it. It's just more of something to keep in mind with him. But yeah, Destroyer's problems are that he has a really slow getup. Like his normal getup is pretty slow. And his normal getup and his armor getup are both relatively the same. So I'd say you're generally better off using armor getup because you can actually just armor through 2 opponent attacks because he's that slow. But his getup attacks are actually pretty solid. Like they got good range. They don't really have finicky hitboxes, and they do solid damage in themselves. Also, another thing that's problem with Destroyer is that his weakness to edge is pretty bad. I'd say worse than Anguirus because at least Anguirus is smaller and has a shield that protects him from just about everything. Destroyer does not have that, and he's a big boy, so it's a lot easier to combo him. So whenever this dude gets launched in the air, there's good odds that your opponent can get multiple hits on you, and that will just drain your hit points very quickly. I still think he's dominant enough in the neutral orbs, just generally having good range on a lot of his moves as well as damage. Keeps him in the A minus tier, even if I don't think he's as good as he was in Destroy All Monsters Melee. Like, it's not even close, if I'm being honest. Now let's talk about our boy, the cyborg chicken of doom, the teleporting guy, the one with the buzzsaw belly, Gigan. Um, this guy is way better than I gave him credit for with the original tier list I had a couple months ago. His is like the things are good about him. He is a pretty mobile character. He is very hard to get away from. His teleport is also good for catching opponents out. If your opponent's charging up a beam and you're within range, you can teleport behind them and basically drag them to the ground with your jump kick, which is really nice because it puts them in a bad get up situation right from the get go. Or jump punch if they happen to be weak to blunt attacks or not resistant or resistant to edge. Makes some matchups very annoying for him. The big is like he also has good combo potential if he catches your opponent jumping out. Like Space Godzilla is a very fun character to turn into combo food, for example. Because he can catch out Space Godzilla's jumps with up kick. You can catch him out, and then you do forward punch, and then you can teleport and jump kick him, and that's like an extra solid chunk of damage there. And then you can catch him out on the ground with an up punch, and that's like a solid 60, almost 80 damage from a single combo just off of a bad interaction. Gigan is very much edge focused. His damage output's the best thing about him. Also, back punch, really good against the opponent that's on the ground in the get up state. If you can catch them out before they press the armor get up or get up attacks or any of that stuff, you can do like a solid 80 to 100 damage doing that, depending on your opponent's resistances. Very nice for the damage, but it does leave you vulnerable afterwards, so you will take a hit. But still, 100 damage is pretty nice. But the biggest problem with Gigan is that on block, he struggles with block a lot. Because his grab is slow, you can see it basically coming a mile away. Your opponent can just jump and punish you for trying to use the grab if they see it coming and can react in time. And a lot of his moves are not great on block in general. So if he messes up on, like, say, the uppercut or his slam moves or any of that stuff, Your opponent can punish you with a fast move of their own or even a launcher of their own if they have enough time for it. But comparing this version to the Destroy All Monsters Melee version is like a 9-day difference. The STE version is so much better than Destroy All Monsters. That version was awful, legitimately an awful character. Here, he can actually function. Yeah, I still put him in the B plus just simply because his issues make some matchups absolutely nightmarish for him. He can actually do decently well against the top tiers in this game, but like certain characters, like one I'll get into specifically later, is absolutely fiendish for him. But that's about it. Overall, I like Eigen. I like him a lot, and I'm happy with putting him there. Now let's go into one of our first A plus characters. We have Godzilla 90s. Now this guy is stellar. Basically has just about everything you'd want in a character. He has his speed is okay. It's perfectly adequate, but he has great beam damage and a fireball that, is excellent for helping him cover out his approaches. He also has a headbutt move that can cover that covers a good amount of distance, does solid damage, and is basically unpunishable by your opponent unless they catch you out with something ridiculously fast or intercept a move with something else entirely, like a stun move or basically stun. Yeah, they basically have to stun you while you're using your headbutt to interrupt it. He also has excellent tail attacks. He does a lot of damage with his tail. His up tail move in particular is really nice because because it's a combo starter. It's a launcher that lets him hit into another combo pretty freely. Leads to some big damage. Yeah, generally I put the monsters that have combo starters and launchers in the higher tiers just simply because they can do something a bit more consistently. That's fairly hard to do in this game, which is, starting combos from just basically a launcher. He also has, oh yeah, this is something I'll also mention for Godzilla 2000, is that the dude has the fastest grab in the game. It is ridiculously fast. The range on it is decent. I would say it's not the best range in the universe, but it grabs more often than not, especially if your opponent's like body stretches way too close to Godzilla. As long as they're stretching close enough, Godzilla will most likely grab you and then punish you with one of his own moves. Makes him a lot harder to mash out of his grab than some of the other monsters in the game, just simply because of how quick his grab is. A lot harder to mash because of its speed. He also has an excellent combo starter in the form of kick throw, in which he runs up and kicks his opponent in the air, lets him get another headbutt, which he then launch into a barrier and then do more combos from there. This guy is legitimately terrifying near barrier because he could just combo you for like 90 damage basically off of his tail attacks alone. It is very scary guy. Of course, he can always throw in his beam attacks if he doesn't feel like charging you down with his headbutts or like some of his other attacks. It's like he does not really have problem with blocking. He does not really have a whole lot of issues, but he does have a couple of issues, mostly in that there's a good amount of end lag on like a lot of his tail attacks. Be careful about spamming those too much. Like the back one's pretty good, but like if your opponent sees those moves coming, they can either intercept them with their own quick attacks or even grab you if they're fast enough, or just jump out of the way entirely. Also, Godzilla has a electric weakness, which is not a great weakness to have because several of the top tiers and just generally strong characters have excellent electric damage, so Godzilla will be taking way more damage from those. But his strengths are more than enough to compensate for any of those weaknesses he has, so that's why I put him in the A plus tier. He just has everything good you'd want from a character in this game. Like, not really much complaints here. Oh, yeah, he also has an incredibly fast anti-air kick that he could just jump and kick. Though, speaking of said character, honestly, I could probably put this dude in the A plus tier, but I'll put him in A minus for now. We have Godzilla 2000. Think of him as similar to Godzilla 90s, but some of his moves are worse, like the headbutt, and his beams do less damage, but he's a faster guy, and he is more edged attack focus. So if you're fighting characters like Ghidorah, Orga, and Space Godzilla, this dude will generally do a bit more damage in general with his melee. But the beam is worse, as well as him having harder combo starters. Like he has a harder time starting combos than Godzilla 90s does. They're a bit harder to execute. You can get pretty much the same level of damage, maybe slightly less than than 90s does. But he has a better jump kick. He also has pretty good tail attacks as well, but they don't lead into combos as much as as 90s does. Like Fireball's still pretty good. His headbutt's still good, but it has a little bit of in lag at the end, so it's not as free as Godzilla 90s generally tends to be. Fast grab as well. He also gets the same combo starter from punch kick. From his grab, he gets the same combo from that, but a little bit harder to pull off because the timing's a little bit tighter, and you don't get quite as much damage because you can't just throw out a headbutt for it or any of that stuff. You generally want to use like dash attack, uppercut, and then like kick afterwards or something like that. Still excellent option, and the character's still very, very good. I'd say he's the top of A minus tier in my opinion. I could easily put him in A plus, but I just think that having really strong combo starters is way better. Also, having one that starts from just one of your basic moves is really nice instead of just having to rely on grabs the whole time for combo potential. Yeah, still a solid character though. Like honestly, you could make an argument for him being an A plus, but I'm putting him in A minus just for consistency. Now let's go into the one character that I think is not good in this game. You know him well. He is the mascot of the 70s. We have Jet Jaguar. Um, let's just say this dude's existence is a little bit on the sadder side in this game. Because here's his problem: 80% of his attacks are blunt focus, which means whenever you fight the top tiers, this dude is handicapped just on that alone. And what makes it worse is that a lot of his moves don't really do that great amount of damage, or the ones that do are fairly laggy and aren't safe on blocks, so it gets punished for them pretty hard. He has surprisingly decent aerial moves, like jump kick is a move of his I love using on get up because you can punish get up attacks pretty hard with it. Unless it's like the Ghidorahs or Megalon, because they can still hit you, but like the Godzilla's jump kick's pretty good there. Another problem that Jet Jaguar has is that his form transformations aren't really like stuff that help out with his problems that much. They're more of just things that exist for the sake of existing rather than something that provides meaningful help to him. Because his giant mode, yes, it lets him, punch the big guys easier because his moves will actually do damage at that point and knock them out of the way. But he's also like he's also the size of an apartment complex. He's also the size of like the Empire State Building at that point. Is like also his moves are very slow when he's a giant. He's way easier to hit when he's a giant. Like you can get some pretty good combos on him, which is really bad. Also, another thing, if your monster has a particularly fast grab or a long one that can take advantage of one of Jet Jaguar's laggy attacks when he's big, you can just grab him out of the state, which means that you literally have a turn Jet Jaguar off giant mode button in the form of a grab. Though if the Jet Jaguar is good at mashing, he can just mash out of the grab and then punish you for it, which is not great. Because he does have decent get up attack, where the hitbox of the, attack on his foot is basically instant, basically happens the moment he presses the button. It's kinda nuts on that point. It just doesn't lead into combos or anything. I'd say it's just kinda mid aside from that. Like, the range is okay, an okay get up attack, but it's just not particularly exciting. I'd say the giant version is a bit more interesting just because of the range and the damage. But again, Big Jet Jaguar is not a great character, although he's not great in general. But his small form's interesting though, because not only is he faster when he's small, and he does less damage when he's small, but he completely reflects weapon attacks while he's in that mode. And if you hold the guard button while you're small, you can actually redirect the enemy's beam attack straight into their face. Which means that some monsters are weak to their own beam attacks, like Mechagodzilla 3 slash Kiryu, Mecha King Ghidorah, Mechagodzilla 2, those kinds of monsters will get hurt pretty hard by their own beams if you do that. But whenever you're small, the opponent can just toss you around and they can still grab you like your normal size, so there's not really like a combat application for small other than being able to dodge a good chunk of your opponent's moves. A kind of neat thing though is that whenever you use a jump attack, you actually just go back to being big after you use your jump attack. You go back to being your normal size. So instead of having to wait for these slow transformation times that the Jaguar usually has to suffer through, you can just use jump attacks and you're back to normal size. So that is a nice thing about the small mode. Yeah, the weaknesses of the guy is just he's not as fast as he should be. He's I'd say he and Godzilla 90s are both fairly similar in speed. I'd say he's slightly faster, but not by much. He doesn't have great options in neutral. He's also weak to electric, which is not very good. Like King Ghidorah versus Jet Jaguar, for example, that matchup is absolute misery for Jet Jaguar. Like if you've seen any of my videos about the dude, you will know that it is a struggle to fight King Ghidorah with Jet Jaguar. Like those are 10-minute matches. And that's just a set of one. That is a very painful experience. I would not recommend it to anyone to do that matchup. But yeah, speaking of King Ghidorah in particular, we have one of our residential top tiers of the game. We have the nasty triple-headed dragon himself, King Ghidorah. This guy is very, very good. Like honestly, I'd say he's probably better to Destroy All Monsters version, just simply because he can abuse neutral a lot more here. And he also has excellent defensive typing. Like he resists blunt, which is very nice against a lot of tail attacks and some of the harder hitting moves in the game. He doesn't resist edge, but it makes sense because he'd be basically broken if that were the case. Because he's still extremely strong anyway. He also has good flying capabilities, like his kicks is good. He also has one of the best flying fierce attacks in the game because he just spams Wind Gust. If you just keep spamming that move while your opponent's blocking it and they can't block, walk behind, can't walk away, you could do like easily 60 to 80 damage on an opponent who's blocking, which is just absurd for a move like that. Which is also incredibly fast, by the way. You can't really intercept that move unless you know it's happening right beforehand with a fast anti-air option, like Godzilla's kick, for example. You basically have to know King Ghidorah is going to jump and fly beforehand. Otherwise, you're not really going to be able to punish his gust attack. It's pretty nuts. Or if you have like a hard hitting secondary beam option, like Godzilla's atomic fireballs is pretty good for stopping it, just because it's fast and it hits them pretty well. Yeah, Ghidorah also has excellent beam attack. You can use it for just spacing purposes and basically anything you'd want from a beam attack. It's pretty good. He also has good combos that you can start from his attacks. Like you can actually get combos off of his back kick and then forward punch. That's a combo you can do. There is also let's see, I'm trying to think what else. Like like his kick moves in general are pretty good. Like up kick's good for punishing opponents that activate their get up attacks too early. You can basically punish them for trying to get up attack you because you could fly up in the air and slam back down on the ground. His forward kick, I'd say, is probably his most underwhelming kick option. His down kick is actually pretty good for damage because it's basically three stomps on the ground. Really good against characters that don't resist blunt attacks. His tail is also pretty good because if his tail is turned back to his opponent and the opponent's close enough, you can actually grab them with the tail. And it's an uninterruptible grab that does like 30 damage. It's a really good grab. Really, really good. And you can even knock it back, and if you're behind the barrier, it'll just knock them into the barrier and you can get more hits off. Oh yeah, also down punch is pretty good anti-air. It's got like a multi-hit property, and you can get more combos off of it. He's just got really good stuff going for him. He's slow, and he's also vulnerable to acid, which only 2 monsters in the game have access to acid, so for the most part, in like 80% of the matchups in this game, or more like 90%, he just does not have a weakness, which is really, really nice. Also bulky on the defense. He's just overall an excellent character that you just can't go wrong with. Just so good. Also just like can be super campy, super zony, just make your life miserable. Now let's go into another character that I find kind of interesting. My opinion on him hasn't changed too much, but I still like this character for the fact that he has pretty good resistances. He also has good neutral tools with just his punches. He has good anti-air options in form of his helicopter kick. He also has good moves on block like his up tail attack. His tail is a pretty good is pretty good for inflicting edge damage on your opponents because he does struggle a little bit with edge attacks if he didn't have this tail. He's also pretty mobile, far from slow. His grab's also decent. It's not he doesn't really get any combos off of his grab unless he's near barrier, but that's normal for a lot of grabs in this game. Although there are several monsters that get combos from their grabs. But he does good damage, pretty mobile. He's got decent defenses. Also resists pretty common types like beam damage and edged attacks. He's pretty good against those. Don't have too many issues with those. In fact, it's one of the reasons why Gigan versus Mechagodzilla 3 is so bad is because he resists Gigan's strongest moves. Yeah, he also has the ability to fly, which is nice. He also does electric damage, which is really good against characters like Godzilla and Mecha King Ghidorah and himself. And Kiryu and Mogira, those characters that just have electric weaknesses. They suffer really badly versus him. He also has access to missiles, which is an excellent compliment because it's like more damage. And some characters are ridiculously weak, and some characters are weak to missiles, like Destroya. Let's see who else. Destroya and Orga. Those two are weak to missiles that I know of off the top of my head. You can do a whole lot of extra damage against them with that. Like Destroya, yeah, Kiryu has good punch options, good kicks, a solid grab, great flying capabilities. His Alinar lets him basically zoom across the map and slam an opponent for 25 damage, but it's bad on blocks, so I wouldn't recommend slamming into an opponent that's guarding. Don't do that. His beam's also solid on the damage front, but it's way better against opponents that have electrical weaknesses. Because if your opponent doesn't have electrical weaknesses, it does generally about 30 to 40 damage on block. Not super amazing, but it's a nice range option for him to have. A lot of monsters in this game tend to be weak to electric anyway, so it's a good option to have. He's a great character. I like him a lot. Now we have one of my personal favorite monsters. We have the three-headed mechanical menace, Mecha King Ghidorah. Now this fella is interesting because he has worse defense than his organic counterpart in the form of the fact that this dude is vulnerable to every single weapon type in the game and takes ridiculous damage from that front. But he also has access to a shield that whenever he's blocking, he absorbs the damage and it heals him instead. So if your opponent is a little bit beam happy and trying to use beams and neutral against you, you can just block it. He also has tasers, and tasers are, as long as your opponent doesn't jump the tasers, they're excellent for setting you up for big beam damage or combos, depending on what your opponent is strong or weak to. Yeah, tasers are excellent because they keep your opponent in place for an incredibly long time, and they drain their energy as well, so they won't be able to use their weapon attacks for a while, which leaves Mecha King Ghidorah free reign to either be campy if he wants to, or just go in and wreck his opponent's face. But he also has decent jump moves in the form of jump kick. Don't use jump punch. That move is legitimately awful. His jump fierce is okay. Not as good as King Ghidorah's. King Ghidorah's is so much better. But the tail attack has useful applications. It could be useful sometimes, but it leaves him vulnerable more often than not. Plus, the reason you'd be up in the air as King Ghidorah, I mean Mecha King Ghidorah, is usually from several of your moves. Like your down punch is basically an uppercut that transitions you straight into the air right away. There's also forward kick, which does the same thing, but he basically goes hua hua with his kicks into the air, and just you can use that to do more damage because you can just beam your opponent, or you can hit them with a jump kick. This character actually has better combo starters and combo potential than King Ghidorah does, just simply because he can actually combo you off of a single get-up attack, which is very rare in this game. You don't generally get combos from get-up attacks, but Mecha King Ghidorah is one of the few that does get that. So if you knock him down and he's belly up, he can get a combo on you, so be aware of that. Also, what's very nice is that he also has, like Godzilla 90s, his tail attack actually one of his tail attacks sets up for a combo which can lead to a solid chunk of 60 plus damage. It's very nice because it's a low that can actually be a combo starter, which is hilarious to me because you generally don't see lows being combo starters all that much in fighting games, and Mecha King Ghidorah just happens to be one of those characters that has one. It's not super consistent, but it's very nice to have, and on level ground, it works pretty well. But yeah, the only reason I put Mecha King Ghidorah lower than King Ghidorah is because weapon weakness is really, really bad. Because you can't have your shield on all the whole time. When you're flying in the air, you're vulnerable to weapons. When you're on the ground, you're vulnerable to weapons. And even though Get Up has like weapon damage halved whenever you get hit by it, it'll still deal a lot of damage to you. Like it'll still do 24 damage. Like for example, Godzilla's Atomic Breath does like 48 damage if you're not blocking. Like you're in the air, it just does 48. And even when you're on the ground, it'll do like 24, which is a solid chunk of damage for a move like that. Yeah, that's the reason why I put Mecha King Ghidorah there, is just simply because he's a bit more frail than he should. He's a bit he's a bit too frail, but he's got great strengths. He also has a hop that's way better than King Ghidorah's. That's something I forgot to mention. King Ghidorah has one of the worst hops in the game. It's slow. It covers a decent amount of distance, but most of your opponents can just run up to you and either punish you with a launcher or a grab or their weapon options or whatever they feel like using, because it's really slow. Mecha King Ghidorah does not have that issue. You can just hop and be good to go. Then we also have Mecha Godzilla 2. who is a character that is worse in this game than he was in Destroy Monsters Melee. Mostly on the resistances front. I'd say his combo game is still pretty good here. His combo game is still good. His missiles are still good. His beam attack is unfortunately worse. That thing's bugged for some reason. So it does less damage than it should do, but it's still okay for like spacing and all that stuff. But the best strengths of Mechagodzilla 2 is that he has a combo throw. He has really good grab range that's much faster than Gigan's grab, so that's really nice. He's also ridiculously he resists edged attacks extremely well. So if your opponent is more edged attack focused like Gigan or Godzilla 2000 is just an example, if they use edged attacks, this dude does not really care. He does not care that much, he won't flinch much at all. He also has a really good special moves in the form of his plasma grenade. His fierce attacks are pretty good. Plasma grenade has good range, decent damage against everything that doesn't resist beam, and can also send opponents flying back pretty far. Pretty solid. His punches are also not bad either. Like I like his overhead slam, which is his back punch. Back punch pretty good, but like some of his other punches aren't too great. His dash attack's good though, because it's got decent range on it. Not really a whole lot of issues to say about that. Hmm, let's see. Yeah, his kicks are decent. Like I really like his kicks for the edge damage potential. He also has a low in the form of down kick. It's not good on block, but if you're just, throwing a bunch of attacks out there and your opponent isn't really known for low blocking, you can throw the down kick out and it'll send them flying, throwing them down into a get up situation. Yeah, Mechagodzilla also has his flying capabilities aren't bad either. He has decent beam while he's flying. He also has good punches, good kicks while he's from the air. His jump special isn't great. I wouldn't recommend using it. It's bigger damage than the punch, but it's also more vulnerable on block than the punch or the kick. He also has an anvil drop ability in which if you press L and R at the same time, he jumps in the air like halfway across the map and lands back down. Don't use that move. It's not good. Sure, it sends you a decent amount of distance, but you can basically walk there in the same amount of time and you won't use up half your energy bar to do it. It's just more of a novelty thing rather than something that I consider useful. But yeah, I still think he's a solid character, just not as strong as he could be, because his weakness is to his own beam damage and electric. That is really bad. So he's like vulnerable to these guys, vulnerable to Destroya, vulnerable to Gigan's beam attacks, Kiryu's beam attacks. He's vulnerable to a lot of attacks, which is very annoying for him. But I think he still performs well enough to fight against characters that, don't resist his strengths too well. He's overall a solid character. I like using him. He's fun to use and he can do quite well. Now we have another character that I consider ridiculously good in this game. We have Mega Gearus. This fast, really, really fast character can make your life miserable. Because she doesn't get energy on her own, but she steals it from the opponent with her fierce attacks. So basically, she uses her stinger to steal energy from you, which leads to an okay beam attack. But a cool mechanic of hers is that whenever she grabs an opponent and she has enough energy, she can just press the normal throw button and she copies their energy attack. Now that's for a majority of the monsters in this game. That won't affect Baragon, it won't affect her, it won't affect Mothra's larva form. So it's useful against or Anguirus. I forgot to mention it won't affect Anguirus either. But her whole thing is that she's ridiculously fast. She can basically bait out attacks and punish them immediately with her moves. She has good punch options. She has a forward kick that is ridiculously fast, even if the damage is low. And you can use it to intercept just some monsters' moves completely. She also has a strong ability that boosts her speed even further when you press L and R at the same time. Just makes her ridiculously fast. She could get huge combo damage off of it, as well as, instant grabs, basically. Makes her very nasty. Also, speaking of her grab, she has two very useful. Well, she technically has three useful grab options, but I'm going to mention these two specifically. Her kick throw is a heal. She heals from her opponent being grabbed, from grabbing her opponent, which is nuts. Healing is not something you see too often in this game. And she just does it anyway. Basically, she can heal from her opponents. Mecha King Ghidorah can heal from beam attacks. King Ghidorah actually has an ability that lets him heal, which is another thing that makes him pretty good because he has a heal, even if it's kind of slow. He can still heal from his opponents. Megagearus can heal from her opponent with the kick attack, and she can still get combos off. She can still get like an attack from the throw as well. She also has the special throw, which steals energy from the opponent. Very nice if you're struggling on trying to get energy from your tail attacks, because there are some characters that resist the edged attacks. So it'd be good to have another way of gaining energy. But Mega Gearus' whole thing is basically just being a very fast character that zooms in and out of combat, can basically punish your opponent for pressing the wrong button, getting big damage, just like getting heals, getting potentially high damage output from the grabs. Well, from the beam attacks she gets from the grabs. She also has decent low options. The only thing she struggles with is dealing with is that some monsters can beam camp her pretty well, and she also isn't super bulky. She does have one weakness though, and it's against two monsters in the whole game. It's Godzilla's beams attack. It's the Godzilla's beam attacks. That's the only thing she's vulnerable to. So in that matchup, she takes a lot more damage from beams than other characters would, unless you're Mecha King Ghidorah. But that's for everything. So she favors up pretty well against most of the monsters. She's just not, as easy to use as someone like, say, King Ghidorah Orga, in which their game plans are pretty straightforward. But she is very dangerous, make no mistake. If you want to be very annoying, if you want to zoom around, go yong yong yong, and just generally be really annoying character, then she's your best bet. She is one of your best bets for that. Now let's go into one of my go-to boys, someone that I really quite enjoy. Also, I'm going to remove this list because I don't think I'm going to put anyone in B minus tier aside from Chit Jaguar. We have one of my favorite boys, someone that I like using a lot. We can call him Mega. He is known as Megalon. Now the reason is now let's go into this dude's strengths. He has a very high damage on a good chunk of his attacks. He has good damage from his beam. Napalm is excellent for setting up situations to where you can easily get 100 damage from just getting a single napalm off on your opponent. Napalm is basically one of his best moves just for the damage output it enables alone. Especially against certain characters that are weak to fire, like this guy and Orga, for example. Those two are weak to fire, and he can get some ridiculously big damage off of it. He also has one of the best jump punches in the whole game, because it's a move that hits you in the air, hits you on the ground, does 25 damage per hit, and can be spammed. Although it's not like super fast. It's not like you can spam it like Meta Knight's down smash, for example. You can't spam it like that, but it's a it's a fast move that you can use to punish your opponents. I've even used it to completely obliterate a Mothra larva from the start of a match. I just basically spammed it over and over and over and over and over again as fast as I could, and I was able to kill Mothra larva basically right from the get-go that way. Kind of ridiculous. Though I think it's more just the AI doesn't know how to react to it rather than it being true. But that was just something that was interesting to point out with that move. But here are Megalon's problems. The reason Megalon is so low on the list is because his weakness is really, really Really bad. Being weak to blunt attacks in a game where a majority of blunt moves have a decent amount of knockback is really bad because there's some fast blunt moves in the game that can prevent Megalon from doing too much. You have to play very safe with Megalon if you want to get stuff done. Basically, force your opponents open whenever they do make a bad option, whenever they use a bad move on you, or they were like slow, or you managed to read them correctly. Megalon is a character that is very much a glass of the cannon. His cannon's pretty good when he gets there, but his glass prevents him from really getting there too terribly often. He can struggle really badly against characters like Godzilla 90s and some other ones that are very fast characters that have quick, blunt options that can just knock him out. You- And because of the blunt weakness, he suffers a lot more from being hit in combos because it's a lot easier to combo him than most other characters because of the blunt weakness. Because it just sends him flying and it gives your opponents time to use the moves they want to use to do damage on you. It is really nasty whenever you're using Megalon because not only is it bad enough you take more damage from each move, but when you do take more damage, you become easier combo food than a lot of the other monsters in the game. Not all of them, of course, but a lot of them, yes. The only reason I don't put him in the same tier as Jet Jaguar is because because this character has moves in neutral that let him actually function. He has moves that are very good in neutral and let him get big damage, like Jump Punch. Basically, Jump Punch and Napalm are what make Megalon work. Although Back Punch is also decent on block because it keeps your opponent far away enough and they can't punish you with a move right away. So he does have moves that let him function in a neutral space. It's just he has to be very careful and he has to block a lot just so he doesn't die. But he's still a character I think works that can actually work. He's just someone that can struggle a lot if you don't know how to use him. He's far from an easy character to use, even if Jump Punch suggests so. Oh yeah, he also has a burrow ability, which lets him burrow underneath the ground. And the good thing about the burrow is that you completely avoid beam attacks and missile attacks. So, like, say the Mecha Godzillas are using their missiles, you can just burrow underground and you don't take any damage. Though the problem is that whenever you get out of being burrowed underground, it's moderately slow. So if your opponent's right next to you whenever you get out of the ground, they can punish you with an attack, which can be pretty annoying. Although you can also use burrow. Although burrow also has a button that lets you grab from underneath the ground, and it lets you basically grab like instantly. It's ridiculously fast. I think it's like frame 4 grab or something like that. It is very quick. You can basically burrow on the ground, and if your opponent like tries to do an early jump to avoid the grab, then you can just grab them immediately afterwards and punish them, which is really nice. Makes it one of the harder grabs to mash out of. Because otherwise, a normal grab is decently easy to mash out of, but like when he's burrowed from underground and he grabs you, he could basically just press a button right away. It is really fast. Yeah, he also has good throws, like his kick throw, where he just throws the opponent in the air and he spins them on his drill. You can actually get an up punch out of it, which is really nice, which you can then lead to a jump punch. So that's like basically 70 damage roughly off of a single throw. That though it's not the most consistent combo if there's like terrain elevation and changes that make things miss more than they should. But against the majority of the cast, that combo works pretty well. He also has his fierce throw, in which what that does is he basically chucks his opponent ground and drills them in. For some reason, it does electric damage. So against characters like Mecha King Ghidorah and the Godzillas and just characters that don't like getting hit by electric attacks, it is actually a pretty decent option. Also forces your opponent into the ground, in which they can either armor get up, or normal get up, or use get up attack. But they won't be able to do it right away. So then you can set yourself up into drilling the underground, If your opponent chooses a bad option, you can punish them immediately afterwards with it. So it can do pretty decently well if your opponent's like stuck on the ground. But he's someone that I would say is generally a bit on the flimsier side because of it. Anyway, let's talk about Mogira. This dude is annoying. Very, very annoying. Because this dude's whole game plan is to run around and shoot his missiles and his beams and his eye beams at you. Because he is one of the fastest monsters in the game. He has a very good weapon damage output, but his defense and his attack are on the weak side. So his game plan for the most part is to spam his weapons while being far away from you as possible. Generally, you'll see eye beam used a lot because it's full range and decently fast. But you also see missiles if your opponent happens to either not resist them or is weak to them, like Destroy a Norgar, for example. He can use his missiles to do like solid 10 damage per hit, even on block. Although it normally does like 20 if not blocked, but if blocked it does like 10, so pretty solid damage for its energy costs. The eye beams also do decent damage, but they're not as high as say his fierce beams, which those do decent damage, but they're very easy to dodge. And they're not great for their energy cost or their damage output. He's interesting because he doesn't have normal kicks or normal fierce moves. Basically, if you just tap the X button, tap your kick button, you get an electric field that stuns your opponent if they're near it. It also does electric damage. So he actually has access to an electric move. It's just not a very high damage one. It's also his get up attack, so it's pretty good as a get up attack because it stuns your opponent longer than the other version does, and does more damage. Pretty good get up attack for punishing your opponent for getting too close. But yeah, his fierce attack, if he taps it, is like a little fire discharge. It does basically no damage. It's basically just there if you don't have energy. I wouldn't really recommend using it. His fierce attacks tend to be a little bit flimsy on that front. Another interesting thing is that Mogira does not have any special throws. So if you grab the opponent, the only thing you can do is just do normal throw, which is just the punch button. That's all you can do. Though he benefits pretty well from throws because he can combo off of them thanks to his insane speed. Also, his punch moves are all actually pretty decent options. He has forward punch, which is basically using his hands forward like a drill. Does solid damage, good for combos. He also has back punch, which spins his arms around like a helicopter formation. Pretty solid move as well. But yeah, basically all the input moves is his punches. He also has a jump punch as well. It's okay. It's mostly used for punishing people that try to grab you. He also has jump kick, which are his missiles, and jump beam, which still has the same problems as normal beam. Though it's a lot harder to dodge because even if you low block it, you'll still get hit by it because it comes down in a 45-degree angle instead of just straight horizontal across. Yeah. A good thing about the character is that he doesn't get energy while he's moving. He only gets the energy when he's either using a special move, when he press L and R at the same time. He shuts himself down temporarily to get a bunch of energy back. Also, when he's in that state, he takes double damage. So if you see a Mogira that's charging up, basically try to punish him with a beam attack or a grab or one of your high damage moves as soon as possible, because you'll do double damage, and that is really nice versus him. But yeah, another interesting thing about Mogira is that he does not like getting hit by beam attacks at all. Beam attacks do a lot of damage to him, particularly electric moves. So like Ghidorah's beam attacks and Mechagodzilla 3's beam attacks will do a ton of damage to him. Like he takes so much damage from those moves. So he does not like doing beam wars against flying Ghidorahs or flying Kiryu slash Mechagodzilla 3s. He does not like dealing with that shenanigans. But he can beam camp most of the other casts pretty well. He is a very obnoxious character if someone knows how to use him. If someone knows how to use him, he is very annoying to fight. Oh yeah, he also doesn't get tased as long as the other characters do when he gets hit by Mecha King Ghidorah's tasers, which is weird, but yeah. Also, he doesn't have a low block, so if he's blocking you, you can mix him up by throwing a low attack in and you'll get hit by it, because he can't block it. He's like the only character in the game that doesn't have a low block that has a block. It's really weird, but it is something worth keeping in mind. Now let's talk about Mothra. Now this character is kind of strange, because she's technically two characters. She has her larva form, which doesn't have a block or a grab button, but has a stun move that she can hit you with from range, which is honestly probably one of her better moves just because of the stun. The glorious stun, as well as the fact that it does like 10 damage each hit, so unless you're blocking, in which case it does 5 damage. Damage itself isn't too great, it's the damage that she can. It's the fact that it leads up Mothra Larva to either using a launcher, which is her launching moves are her back punch, which she squiggles around on the ground. She goes blah, 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 and you can launch your opponent. And if you're in the correct angle, you'll send your opponent flying, and you can get several combos off of it, which is really nice, especially against characters like Mogira and Megalon, who don't resist blunt attacks very well, especially Megalon. But Megalon might be sent flying too high for that. I know it works on Mogira because I was practicing against Mogira earlier with Mothra. I basically did like a 60 plus damage combo just from one move of Mothra Larva. So while Mothra Larva is technically slower than her adult form, she does more damage and she resists all beam attacks except for fire. Fire does a lot of. Actually, she does resist fire. She resists fire. I think she's vulnerable to acid. That's what it was. She was vulnerable to acid, which only two monsters in the game know. So, not really a relevant weakness at all. Yeah. Also, Mothra Larva has excellent movement in the form of Down Punch. Lets her move pretty far. The biggest problem with the move is that if you're too close to your opponent, it'll just lock onto them. It's bad on blocks, so you get punished for it. That's good for mobility. It gives her a lot more movement than Mothra Larva would have otherwise, because she's one of the slower characters. But that's all I really have to say about the larva version. Let's talk about the adult form. So whenever you are larva, you can press L and R at the same time, and whenever she presses L and R, she transforms into her adult form. Now this adult form, I would say, is the worst, not the worst character, but is the lesser character out of the two when it comes to combat powers. Just simply because she doesn't have as great combo potential. She has access to multiple stun moves, but they don't really lead up to anything for the most part. Except for the down fierce. That one's pretty. That one's neat for stunning your opponent as well as doing decent damage. It can even block beam attacks, I think, so that's nice for that. But she doesn't have as much great combo potential as her larva form does. But she does get access to weapons. She also has a stinger tail ability, a stinger ability, which is really nice for edge damage. Very good against a large chunk of the cast. She also gets back kick, which is an excellent move because it does solid damage. It lunges forward and keeps Mothra far back enough to where your opponent won't really be able to punish you very well. Even with some of the longer range grabs, she can just act out of the move pretty fast. It's easily one of her best moves. It's very nice, but she also gets a beam attack that's electric damage. It's honestly pretty underwhelming on the damage front. It does like 60 damage whenever your opponent is vulnerable to electric. Not great on the damage, but the range is good, and it's not really easy to get away from it as it is for some of the other beam attacks in the game. She's also not very. It's like while she is technically faster in her adult form, I'd say she's functionally slower just because she doesn't have high mobility in the form of down punch. But yeah, basically the how Mothra's game plan is try to do as much damage as possible as the larva, using the web move to get stuns on your opponents so you can get free hits to launch them and do big damage that way. Try to, maximize the life expectancy of your larva form until you have to transform into the adult. And then you use the adult form to either camp your opponent out and beam them, or use any moves you have that they're weak to try to finish them off. I'd say Mothra probably. I'd say in terms of being a character that I think can actually have good competitive viability, I would say Mothra definitely bumped up the most in my list because she is a character that I'd say is pretty solid. Mostly because of the larva form having good combo potential. That though, it does struggle versus the top tiers like King Ghidorah and Orca. Those two still give her a lot of trouble. But that's kind of normal because King Ghidorah and Orga are both pretty strong anyway. But yeah, speaking of the character, we have Orga. Now this guy is also pretty crazy, pretty kooky. Absolute bodaciousness. Absolutely fabulous character. One of the most fun characters in the game. His whole thing is that he is a grappler. But unlike a lot of grapplers that tend to be slow or have bad tools in neutral, this dude is not slow. He's probably about as fast, if not faster than Jet Jaguar is, which is depressing. But yeah, he has blunt resistance, so a lot of the stronger moves in the game don't really do too much to him. I mean, you'll still take damage, but he won't. But it's not really ideal to use blunt moves versus this guy. And also, here's another thing that's interesting about the character. He has multiple grab moves. He has one of the ones you'll be seeing a lot is back fierce, in which he basically lunges at his opponent, picks them up, and chucks them behind him. And you could do this with pretty much every single monster in the game. It's a very good move because you can because if you're because you can it has good range. So you can space out your opponent's get up attack. They use the get up attack, and they're like decently slow, and they got a little bit of period of vulnerability after their get up attack. So you can activate the throw and then chuck them again. It is pretty good. He also has high damage on basically a majority of his moves. Like his back punch does good damage, and also sends the opponent flying if they get hit by it. Forward punch, you'll see that move be used against characters that are resistant to blunt attacks or weak to edged attacks. It's pretty good for that, but it is vulnerable on block, so I wouldn't recommend using it on block or neutral because your opponent can punish you for using it. Yeah, you also see up punch for its anti-air capabilities, as well as punishing people that are on get up, that are just laying on the ground prone. Same with down punch. Down punch is like a more safe version. He also had his down kick is one of the easiest kicks to use if you want to use the toe stub infinite. Which basically what you do is you use down kick, and if your spacing is good, you'll hit your opponent and it'll stub their toe. It'll be stuck in that toe stub animation. You basically see it every time Megalon hits an opponent with the napalm. Pretty much every monster has this animation, except for the flying characters like Megaguirus and Mothra Adult, who don't have that animation. But toe stub animation's probably one of the worst animations to get if you're the one on the receiving end, because you can't mash out of it, and you can't block out of it. So Orga can actually just keep using down kick if your spacing's good to just toe stub your opponent infinitely. The reason you don't see it happen is because it'll make the match last like 9 minutes. Because it takes forever, because the damage is pretty low. But it is something you can do if you wish to do that. Although you won't see it just simply because, you know, You have to do it perfectly the whole time, and it's kind of boring. And I'm here to have fun with the game, not here to bore myself to death. If I wanted to bore myself to death, I'd do something else. But yeah, Orga is excellent. He's got great damage output. He's got decent mobility. Oh yeah, and his beam damage is actually not terrible either. I don't really use his beam, mostly because his melee powers are so good. But if you want to use beam with him, it's not a terrible option. Just usually against characters like Mechagodzilla 2 and those that are more vulnerable to beam attacks in general. Just don't use it against characters like Gigan, because Gigan will just punish you for doing such a dumb move. Oh yeah, he also has an excellent secondary weapon in the form of his acid stun, in which if you just tap R1, the beam weapon button, if you just tap it, he'll shoot a little acid attack, which is one of the only acid attacks in the game, by the way. One of the few. You'll stun your opponent, which you can then set up for your grab, which you can either set it up for. Now, Orga is interesting because he has multiple different things he can do from grab. He has normal throw, which is probably the most underwhelming bit, unless you're in rage, in which case you do like 45 damage off of throw. Just a single throw, by the way. It's ridiculous, but not really that great of a move. You have his kick throw, which he picks up his opponent, slams him in the ground, and they get sent flying into the air. This lets you do ridiculously big damage from your throw. You can easily get like 70 damage off of it. It is nuts. And then there's the one where he slams his opponent to the ground and elbows them. You basically use that if you want your opponent on the ground right next to you. But generally speaking, you're better off using the other throw if you have the opportunity, just simply because the other throw lets you do big damage. And still sends your opponent to the ground, so then you can punish them with another hit afterwards if you're quick enough. But yeah, there's a reason that Orga's top tier in this game, and it's because he just loves grabbing people, he loves trucking them all over the place. Doesn't matter your resistances, you can't resist the grab. That's all I can say. You can't resist getting tossed like a toy. Oh yeah, he also has good jump moves. He has jump kick, where he basically body slams the ground. Actually hits grounded opponents. Pretty good move, because it also puts you in a get up state, so then if your opponent is impatient, you can punish them with a get up attack of your own. Jump punch is also good for the damage and anti-air capabilities. His jump fierce is interesting because it's another throw option he has, and depending on how the opponent's get up attack works, he can actually grab opponents while they're get up attacking and chuck them out of it. It is quite hilarious. Also, apparently you can do a bug with it, but I don't know how the bug works. But it is something you can do, which is interesting. Now let's go over the two final characters. We have Rodan, who is a character that I would say is significantly worse in this game than he was in Destroy All Monsters. Because yes, his weaknesses are still the same, but being a fast, campy beam character is not as strong in this game as it was in the previous one. Mostly because it's harder to do damage on get up, it's harder to do damage on opponents that are stuck in the ground, you do less damage. Also, Rodan's grab got nerfed, so it's not as fast as it used to be. And he still has all those weaknesses, as I mentioned before. Although he does have weakness versus concussion now, so that's lovely. But he still flies pretty fast. He still has one of the best flying capabilities. He still beam camps you. It's just not as strong as it once was because you can block it now instead of just tanking the damage the whole time. Slightly less painful experience for everyone else involved, but Rodan definitely feels the pain. Also, he doesn't have that infinite flying glitch that he does in the other game. So he can't just camp the air the whole time. He could still be in the air for a long time, just not basically live in the air the whole time. But yeah. He does have good options in terms of he has decent fierce attacks that you can use to punish opponents that are blocking too much. But it is bad versus moves like Headbutt. Headbutt will give you a lot of trouble if you try to use your own fierce attacks too much. He has good kick moves, like his forward kick does decent damage, is good for catching out opponents that are trying to hop away. Up kick is an anti-air option that you can use to punish jumps or hops. Good against opponents that resist blunt attacks. There's also his uppercut, which is decent range. Not great on block though. He doesn't really have too many moves that are great on block, but he has high mobility, so he can like determine the engagement and how the rules go. He's pretty solid on that front. It's just his biggest problem is that he's vulnerable to edged attacks, and he's vulnerable to them really badly. He's basically the flimsiest character in the game, basically below Megalon. Mostly because he has less HP than Megalon. So, like, if you've ever seen my Godzilla versus Rodan video I did a little while back, I basically ended that match in like a minute. And that was with Rage, and the dude was taking like 100 damage from like 3 moves. It was insane. Rodan is ridiculously weak to edged attacks, especially if they're fast anti-air ones too. But yeah, I think he's still better than like B plus tier, but I'd probably put him. I'll move around this tier list a bit. So we'll put you here. Put you like here. Now the only reason I have them in this way is just because this is what I think of the monsters. We'll put you there. We'll put you above them because I still like these two more than you. Yeah, we'll just do that. That's good. That's good. I'll probably put you about here. Now let's go on. But yeah, Rodan, not as strong as he used to be, but I still think he's a very capable fighter. You just have to be very careful with him. It's just your strengths are as strong as they used to be, and your weakness is still there. I still think he's perfectly usable. You just have to be very careful with him because he's a very frail character. Now let's go into a very special boy. The boy that basically breaks the game in half just by existing. We know this guy as Space Godzilla. What makes him so dangerous, you might be asking? What makes him worthy of the coveted S tier title? What makes him better than literally every other character in the game and means that fighting him is a painful experience if you're fighting a player? Not the AI is way too dumb to use him properly. Well, not too dumb to use him properly, it's just the AI refuses to use him properly. Let's go into something that is pretty obvious of his, but isn't really quite as broken as one would think it is. Let's talk about his grab. It is a grab that basically can get you from halfway across the stage. Imagine, well, you know those memes about Marth and his ridiculous grab range. Well, imagine that, but made manifest in a character. That is Space Godzilla's grab. He can also get combos off of it too. Like if you're in the perfect range and he uses his fierce throw option, he'll send the opponent right back. He'll throw the opponent right to him, like because the throw's behind him. But if you're far enough away, it'll just basically the opponent being thrown right to you. And you can either use your up kick, which is your tail attack, your back kick, which is a high damage move that's edged, or one of my personal favorite options, because it makes the opponent's life much more miserable, is up punch. And also, it's a pretty good move for punishing that because up punch not only does 20 damage in of itself, but also a neat little thing is that even if your opponent does an armor get up or get up attack or does whatever they want from whenever they get up from the ground, the stun still carries over. So if your opponent's not good at mashing, which you can tell your opponent's not good at mashing if they can't mash out of Space Godzilla grab. If they're not good at grabbing, they'll be stuck in stun. And if you charge up your beam attack before that happens, you can basically get a nice easy 100 plus damage off of a single throw just simply because of the fact that you were able to stun your opponent with the grab. Not stun them with the grab, but you stun them after your throw. But that's just one of the things Space Godzilla can do. He also has he can also summon 2 crystals, which give him enhanced energy regeneration, which is really good because he needs all the energy he can muster because he is very beam heavy. He really requires a lot of energy for his attacks. Like his uppercut, which is full map, basically. It does okay damage, but I find the energy cost for it's too high. So I don't use it too much, but it is something you can use. It's ridiculous for its range, if nothing else. But another thing I really like about Space Godzilla in this game is that he's ridiculously quick. His stat, now you might be thinking, but he has 2 speed. He should be ridiculously slow, right? He is slow, but only when he's walking. If you have a dash after a couple of seconds or so of startup, he has a levitate ability which lets him zoom across the map at blisteringly high speeds. He is one of the fastest characters in the game with that dash. He is very quick. He's basically about as fast as Mogira is, who's, a character with max speed stats, so that's kind of nuts. So you can basically just dash around, you can outmaneuver your opponents, you can get behind them if they try to use a beam attack on you. You can use it to get out of tight situations. Well, may not. Actually, you can't use it to get out of tight situations because there's a decent amount of startup there and your opponent can punish you with an attack if you're not careful. But the good thing about the dashing capabilities is that he has a kick move, which is a good anti-air option, does decent edge damage. He has the punches, which you can use for combo as well as intercepting enemy moves. But one of my favorite moves out of his dashes is his fierce move, which summons a bunch of rocks around him in a giant circle and lasts for like a long while. Its damage isn't good, but it's basically a giant. It basically tells the opponent if you enter the zone, you will either take damage and get sent flying, or you have to block it. That's basically 2 options your opponent has if they want to get close to you at that point. Yeah, that's like some of his strongest options. He also has really good beam damage from his primary beam attack, so he can be campy if he wants to. You just have to be careful against certain characters that can teleport in on you, or that can either teleport on you, or get in close on you, or just can camp you. You just have to be careful about that stuff, but it's not too bad against. But there is counterplay against these characters because you are playing the busted guy, so you got that advantage going for you. Another interesting thing about Space Godzilla is that his jump is not very good. Basically, because whenever he jumps up, he basically levitates the air very slowly, and all of his punch options and all of his physical moves from the air are either actually very slow, and you can actually duck underneath them if your monster's small enough. Actually, you can duck underneath them even when you're big, like Orga, for example. You can just duck underneath it and then punish Space Godzilla for his jump option. So you won't see Space Godzilla's use jump too much. Other than like just to fly around, have extra mobility options. Yeah, another cool thing about Space Godzilla is whenever he has his crystals, not only does he get enhanced energy generation, so he gets energy faster, but he also gets access to just whenever you press the fierce button again, it spams a beam attack from the crystals, which are unblockable, by the way. So even Mecha King Ghidorah can't block them, or Anguirus can't block them either. You'll just take damage from it straight up. It doesn't do any knockback, but it does do damage. Also does friendly fire to Space Godzilla, so be careful about being line of sight of your own crystals on that front. Otherwise, you'll just take damage too. Kind of weird thing about Space Godzilla's crystals is that they can do decent damage to your opponent with the normal beam as well as a homing projectile, which you can press by going up fierce, I believe. Yeah, up fierce. If you use that, you can basically summon homing missiles, which Track your opponent and hit for like 15 blunt damage. I don't really like using them too much, but they are an option if you want to use them. They're good against characters that are either weak or non-resistant to blunt attacks. Ones that resist it don't care too much. He also has an unblockable crystal attack, which I believe this move is forward fierce that does 40 damage and is unblockable. So if you are holding the block button and this dude uses the move and hits you with it, you'll take the full 40 damage. Also only costs 3 energy. The only reason this move isn't too ridiculous is because the startup on it is fairly long, and as another thing of note, it also doesn't take hits, but is like it also doesn't have amazing range. It's more of a close range option for Space Godzilla to use if your opponent's blocking too much and you don't want to use grab because you know that the opponent can mash out of it. Because, well, mashing is basically the best option you have against grab if you don't either play super campy or you teleport around or burrow around Space Godzilla's grab. Because the counterplay to Space Godzilla's grab is to either be far enough away from the grab in general so it can't hit you, which means basically being on the very edge of the map where the game lets you be at and just do beam shenanigans. Or you can either teleport behind him and he won't be able to grab you. If you teleport before the grab comes out, he won't be able to get you. Or burrow on the ground because he can't grab you if you're underneath the ground, which is something that only Baragon and Megalon can do. I forgot to mention this for Baragon. He can burrow underneath the ground, but Baragon's is worse than Megalon because it takes a lot longer for his to start up, so you can actually punish him while he's digging underneath the ground. Well, starting to dig under the ground. He does have more moves out of Barrow, but they're not super great. Anyway, back to Space Godzilla. Yeah, Space Godzilla's whole thing is that he has a ridiculous grab, which if you don't know how to mash, or your mash is too slow, the opponent can get like 200 damage off of you before the battle even properly starts. But it's like, oh hey, I know how to get out of his grab. Awesome. Now you have to deal with a dude that is ridiculously fast, has excellent spacing options, does lots of beam damage in general, has crystals that do damage to you regardless if you're blocking or not, great moves that do lots of damage in general. Not though a fair amount of them are either slow or unsafe, so it's not like the dude is impossible to deal with in melee. It's just kind of hard to catch the dude and hard to do damage to him versus him at range. Also, the dude has more HP than everyone else. For some unfathomable reason, he has 600 HP, whereas everyone else is 400. Unless you're Rodan, I think Rodan's is less, but I don't know if that's confirmed. It's just something I noticed with Rodan. He takes way more damage than the others. But yeah, Space Godzilla has more HP than everyone else. He goes ridiculously fast. He has a grab that basically breaks how fighting games generally work. The only reason the grab isn't just an instant I win move is if you have good mashing. You can mash out of it. It's one of the easier grabs to mash out of, just simply because the animation for it is not too fast. Not like Megalon unburrowing on the ground and grabbing you. It's not as fast as that. Nowhere near that level. But yeah, this is my newest tier list for Godzilla Save the Earth from the matches I've done against RK Ryuki, if that's how to pronounce the channel. Sorry for mispronunciating it. It's kind of what I do. But yeah, this is the tier list that I have for Godzilla Save the Earth currently. I might come up with something more definitive for the tier list in the future, but this is what I have for now. You all have a wonderful day. Have a Merry Christmas. I'll see you all in the next video. You have a wonderful day. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you around. You have a wonderful day. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and all that good stuff. I'll see you around. Also, if you want to do matches, just feel free to DM me on Discord. I might link my Discord at some point. Anyway, y'all have a wonderful